Yo, what is going on, guys? Got a story for you here today titled Found Out My Christian Wife Had a Spicy Past and She Begged Me Not to Divorce Her. So, this is one of those situations where the husband finds out that his perfect wife was oh not so perfect, and he decides to, assumedly, go ahead and divorce her. Now, this is something, again, that a lot of modern women like to do, is they don't tell men what they did in their past because they know exactly what the consequences will be, and the consequences will be that the men will not want to deal with them anymore. So you have these women who, whether it be they're Christians or they just lie and lie about who they actually are, but at the end of the day, if the husband finds out, he's going to divorce them anyway. But guys, don't forget to like the video on your way in. Don't forget to subscribe if you are new here. And let's take a look at this story. So it's a 35-year-old guy, and it says a 35-year-old man shares how discovering his 33-year-old wife's hidden past shattered his image of her and why he ultimately chose to walk away even though she was begging him to stay. He says, I'm a 35-year-old male and my now ex-wife is 33. We were married for almost 5 years, and from the beginning, our relationship centered around shared faith, values, and a commitment to building a future together. She was deeply involved in our church, apparently, volunteering, leading prayer groups, mentoring younger women. Her devotion and moral compass were part of what made me fall in love with her, or so I thought. This is something that I've mentioned on the channel before, guys, and something that I think we're seeing more and more these days, is you will have these women who have very questionable pasts, and so what they do is they oftentimes go to these places because they know that's where these loyal men are, right? They're looking to build a family, they're looking to marry and settle down. So you'll have women who join these groups even though they traditionally wouldn't have otherwise. You know what I mean? So a lot of guys, they think they get a good deal, right? Oh, she's a fantastic wife. Look, she's in my church group. But unfortunately, a lot of women are actually using these sorts of groups, church groups, charity groups, and so on, to kind of lock down dudes that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get. Let's continue. Over time, there were little things that didn't add up, apparently. Whenever conversations drifted towards the past, especially about mistakes or youthful decisions, she would get tense. She often said vague things like, I wasn't proud of who I used to be, but never elaborated. I respected her privacy, assuming that she had a few youthful mistakes like anyone else. I never imagined how deep those mistakes went. So this is a huge concern, by the way. If you have a girlfriend or you have a wife who refuses to elaborate on their past, I think that tells you everything that you need to know, right? Again, if you flip this around and you made it a dude, like there's a good chance that the dude would be a criminal or something. If he's, if you've got a guy out here and he's refusing to tell his wife his past, I mean, usually that would probably make him some sort of a criminal, right? But you'll have these dudes and they'll hear this and they'll just completely ignore it and think to themselves, oh, well, it's fine. I'm sure it can't be that bad. She's refusing to elaborate, but I'm sure it's something minor. But that's not always the way it is. In fact, a lot of the times the women don't elaborate because they know that the husband wouldn't have been her husband in the first place if she actually told him. Anyway, how I found out. The truth came out by accident. He says, I ran into an old college friend who had recently moved back to our town, and during lunch he mentioned that he recognized my wife from years ago, but not from school or anything innocent. He told me hesitantly that she used to work at a high-end gentleman's club under a different name, not as a server, not behind the bar, but on stage, apparently. At first, I thought that he had to be mistaken, but when I confronted her that night, her reaction told me everything that I needed to know. So this Christian wife, right, who this dude thought was probably a lot more, didn't have this sort of a past, he finds out that she was secretly a night worker, essentially. And of course, this is grounds for divorce instantly, especially considering the woman didn't tell you. You'll get these guys who will be like, well, it's the dishonesty that really got to me, and that's why I divorced her. Like, no, the reason why you're divorcing the woman is because what she did was just not marriage material whatsoever. So hopefully it's not one of those situations. But this is just instant divorce territory. And it's just a real kick in the teeth, adding on top of it the fact that she didn't actually say anything about this as well. So she didn't tell him whatsoever. And let's see how her reaction went. She broke down crying immediately, apparently. She admitted that in her early 20s, she had been a dancer for nearly 3 years to survive bad circumstances. She swore that life was far behind her, that she had found salvation, turned her life around, and never looked back. She begged me to forgive her, to understand that she was not that woman anymore. She said everything we built together was real. You know, it's funny because a lot of these women, they pretend like they have no other option. You know, I was a dancer for 3 years, but I only did it to survive bad circumstances. You know, couldn't get a regular job. Okay, couldn't make coffees for a living or something. Couldn't be, you know, someone who's working in an office somewhere. No, can't do any of that. Okay, we had to go out there. We had to be a dancer, a night worker, essentially, because there were just bad circumstances. I find it very hard to empathize with these people because, again, if you were to switch around the genders, right? You know what dudes would do in this situation? Get a job, right? Like, dudes don't have this sort of an outlet, right? If you're screwed as a guy, you need money. I mean, you can't just go out there and be a dancer, okay? And women like to claim it's their only option. Typically, it's not actually their only option. It's just what they gravitate towards. So she begged me to forgive her, to understand that she was not that woman anymore, etc., etc. No, this is instant divorce territory. He says, but I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't unknow it. It wasn't the secrecy that broke me. It was the past itself. Fantastic. I had married her believing she embodied a certain kind of purity and moral standing, values that were fundamental to how I saw our marriage, our family, and our future children. Finding out that she had lived a completely different kind of life, regardless of how much time had passed, shattered the foundation for me. The woman I believed I had married no longer existed in my mind. And see, that's the thing, right? Is like, dudes who have any degree of self-respect, it doesn't matter if this was 3 weeks ago. It doesn't matter if it was 10 years ago. A lot of guys are simply not going to put up with it. The time, like how long ago the woman did something like this, doesn't actually matter. And usually they'll bring it up like, oh, you know, it happened like 10 years ago. This was just a silly decision that I made back in the day. But to men, it really doesn't matter. And nor should it, in my opinion, right? If you've got a dude, for example, and he commits multiple felonies, but they were multiple awful felonies, okay, but he goes to his wife, oh, don't worry, sweetie, you know, I committed them like 7 years ago, so it shouldn't actually matter. The fact remains that the dude still committed felonies. It doesn't actually change anything, especially considering she's been lying about it the whole time as well. He said, I told her plainly that I couldn't continue. It wasn't about anger or anything like that. It was about the reality that my feelings had changed permanently. She begged, she offered therapy. What kind of an offer is this, by the way, guys? Like, oh, yeah, you know, the marriage was over because I discovered this about her, but hey, you know, she offered therapy, as if that would change anything. She promised anything to do anything to make it right, but you can't erase history. And no matter how hard she tried, I knew I could never look at her the same way again. He says, everyone deserves a second chance in life, but that doesn't mean everyone is required to accept a past that they are not comfortable with. For some people, the past matters not out of judgment, but because it shapes what they want for their future. I was not willing to compromise my vision of marriage and family for a truth that I would never be able to forget. And here's the thing is, a lot of women will say like, oh, this is insecure, or this is mean, or you shouldn't be looking at a woman's past. And I always find this hilarious, guys, considering that women are incredibly judgmental of a man's future, for example, right? They care about where you're going in your life, what kind of job you have, what kind of direction you're going in, especially if they're considering you for a long-term relationship. But it's just funny to me how men are not able to make their own considerations without being insulted and being called insecure, right? If you're a dude that cares about this, a lot of people are going to call you these sorts of things. And usually the reason why they call men these things, by the way, is because they are the ones who have very questionable histories that they don't want to tell you about. But guys, we are going to be leaving today's episode there. Don't forget to leave your thoughts and your comments. Make sure you guys take care of yourselves, and I'll be seeing you all in the next one. Peace.